battling the morning traffic to reach your offices or your colleges. And throughout the day, you're thinking about how I'm going to beat the evening traffic to reach home. I'm sure at least once you have wondered, why the hell are we staying in cities? Indian cities today are in a big mess. Too many people, too less space, too many cars, too much of pollution, and in general, chaos. And despite this, we are adding more and more people to our cities every day. A quick look at urban statistics tells us that in 1951, only 17% of India's people lived in cities. By 2011, we had almost doubled it to 31%. And by 2021, it is projected to reach 42%. Just imagine, almost 50% of India's people, almost half of our entire country will start living in our cities in the next merely 5 to 7 years. Are our cities prepared to manage this? How are we going to govern our cities when half of the entire country will start living in them? How will we ensure that at least a basic minimal quality of life is offered to our citizens? Before we move towards addressing these questions, let us take a moment to understand why cities were formed in the first place. One single factor, almost single-handedly, triggered urbanization in the entire world. That is food surplus. The day as humankind we could produce more food than we could consume, the concept of a city was formed. It is no coincidence, therefore, that all the cities, early cities of ancient civilizations, are located along rivers. The fertile river plains offered us an opportunity to produce this food surplus and also gave us a means of transport to trade it. Cities today are obviously more complex. But really speaking, the underlying function of a city has not changed over centuries. Cities are centers of economic development, centers of excellence. They have helped prosper kingdoms and empires before, and now they help prosper our nations. There are 4 key economic drivers which are absolutely essential for a city to develop, to thrive, and be successful. First is that a city needs to have a product or a service that it excels in. It is its unique feature, its unique selling point. A classic example is the Banarasi sari from Banaras, or for a contemporary cities, it is the IT proficiency of Bengaluru and Pune. Second, a city needs to actively access markets. These markets cannot be just local or regional. They have to extend across oceans. Early cities had recognized this, and that's how Indian cloth had reached all corners of the world. Today, a world-class city necessarily interacts very closely with global markets. Third, a city needs to have a sustained food supply from its rural hinterlands. In fact, it needs to be very closely associated with the rural economy. The urban and the rural are often considered as two opposite ends of a policy spectrum, urban investments versus the rural investments. But actually, the success of an urban economy is almost completely dependent on the success of a rural economy. And fourth, a city needs to actively and successfully tackle the various civic issues and problems that arise when more people start staying in a smaller area. In economic terms, these are the negative externalities of cities. It is a price that all of us collectively pay in order to derive the positive economic values of a city. In fact, it is this aspect which gives the urban conveniences in order to derive maximum revenues from a city. Today, India is often labeled as a reluctant urbanizer. Why is it when, despite adding so many more people to our cities than anywhere else in the world, what is holding back Indian cities? What is it that we need to do so that our cities will be able to fulfill their economic potential? Well, one economic reasoning is that a city needs to address all the 4 economic parameters which are necessary for the city to thrive and be successful together, comprehensively as a whole. Investments in just one of these drivers is not enough. And obviously, there are problems in doing so. The decision-making on all these 4 economic drivers is fragmented in the 3 levels of our government. Take, for example, economic policy. Municipal governments or urban governments are never involved in making an economic policy for a city. Have you ever seen municipal corporations actively getting engaged in enhancing a city's product or aggressively reaching out to international markets? In fact, cities today only look at resolving the civic issues, and this is primarily through making investments in urban infrastructure. But we have to understand that this investment also remains restricted because a city is not addressing the other 3 very important economic drivers adequately. If we are to learn from the past, from our own ancient early cities which had flourished and thrived for so many centuries before, there is one significant difference between the then and the now. It is in how, and more importantly, who governs our cities. Early cities had a king, a ruler, who shaped a city's economic policy, who was actively involved in enhancing a city's product, who went out and aggressively sought international markets for it, and who also made decisions on where to invest for the urban infrastructure. Today, a city has multiple leaders, and thus effectively no leader at all. At the local level, we have the mayor, who leads the team of politically elected representatives. We also have the municipal commissioner, who heads the executive team of municipal officers and departments. We have the member of the parliament, the MP for the city, who represents the city at the central government. We also have the MLAs, who represent small parts of the city to the state government. One amongst them is the guardian minister, who is generally concerned with the welfare of the city. But frankly speaking, none of these leaders today have the mandate nor the necessary infrastructure and framework to look at all the 4 economic drivers that a city needs to thrive and be successful. Once again, these leaders and their decision-making is fragmented across the various levels and departments of the government. What our cities lack today is a leader who is concerned, who is accountable for how a city performs. This leader, above all, needs to have a vision, needs to create where this city needs to go. This leader needs to engage himself in deriving or driving local economic decisions. This leader should be able to identify the uniqueness of the city and cash in onto it. A classic example is the city-state of Singapore, who has cashed in on its very limited economic potential to create a world-class city. This leader also needs to engage, or rather aggressively reach out to international markets. This leader also needs to be able to attract a talented pool of people and retain them by investing in world-class urban infrastructure. Consider the city of Dubai. A few years ago, the sheikhs of Dubai identified this, tapped into the global markets, and today we have the result in front of us. The diamond of the desert, the city of Dubai, has flourished. So who could be this leader, this champion who is required to drive a city's economic policy? Can it be a mayor? Possibly. But do we have mayors today who are equipped to take on this role? Do we elect our mayors based on his or her capacity to be able to govern a world-class city? Mayors of London and New York are held accountable every year for a city's economic performance. Their back-end offices are equipped to do just that. Unfortunately, urban politics in India is still such that it rarely attracts qualified people to it. Urban policy experts are almost never consulted or engaged for decision-making. Urban politics is still mired in personal one-upmanship and display of flex banners. So, possibly this leader or this champion could also be the MP for the city. Or it could be the garden minister who takes up the challenge. Or democratically, we can also have a totally new person with a brand new job profile. An urban CEO, or a city chief minister, or an urban prime minister, if you may. Above all, this city's leader needs to have considerable decentralized decision-making powers and autonomy, almost like a king, but of course in a democratic setup, to be able to drive local urban economic policy. Apart from the autonomy and the decentralized decision-making, this leader will need a policy unit which is working back-end to help him or her to make decisions. It is like an urban policy office or a city transformation unit which is working 24/7 to collect and collate urban data. This office actively engages in and involves urban experts to arrive at decisions which are important for a city. Today, almost all great cities, not almost, all great cities of the world have these offices in place. A new addition called as the policy nudge units are being established in London and elsewhere to further help improve and enhance the working and the functions of this city leadership. For India to move towards making great, successful and vibrant cities, which is going to accommodate more than 50% of her people, we need a very serious paradigm shift in the way we govern our cities. This leader or this champion is just one step towards making that change. But this leader could really become the key for putting the city on a global map. Only then, and only then, will India shed her reluctance to urbanize and begin her journey towards successful world-class cities of the future. I have no doubt then that great cities in India will once again be born. Thank you.